Hi there, and welcome back to the Mojo Book Nook. I'm supposed to have a co-host? Where did he get to? Okay, let's see if we can conjure ourselves up a co-host. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Whoa! Oh, geez, I forgot I wasn't naked.
You were late. I had no choice.
I'm sorry, I got a little bit behind my time because I wanted to get dressed up and be looking good today.
I gotta say, you're looking very Lestat-esque.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
How are you today?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm very well today.
And I hope you're doing well, and thank you for joining us again. What incredible book do we have off your extensive collection, darling?
Another of my favorite authors, Anne Rice, and today, Interview with the Vampire.
What a great book!
And what a fantastic movie. Huge cast, sweeping from continent to continent.
Over eons.
And a beautifully well done, very true to the book movie.
Extremely true to the book. So before we get into the movie, as always, let's start talking about the book. So please, because you know a lot about Anne Rice, you have an extensive collection. I haven't read as many Anne Rice books. I did read The Vampire Chronicles. I did read Interview, Lestat, and Queen of the Damned. So
and there's Lasher and
yes,
Tall
and Tall Toast. And then we get into the Witching Hour
yes,
books.
And that's another of my favorite collections of Anne Rice. The Mayfair Witches, that's another whole issue.
Yeah.
But you gotta read Anne Rice. The first time that I picked up Interview with the Vampire, I got about 2 chapters in and went, really? Put it down, didn't touch it again for several years. Seriously.
Really?
And then one day I went back to my bookshelf and I looked at it and I went, I'm gonna try this again. Picked it up, started reading it, devoured it, couldn't get enough. Went from the book to the next book, to the next book, to the movie, to the next movie, and I don't know what happened.
See, and I was the opposite. I burned right through it the first time I got into it.
So Daniel interviews Louis, who he's an interesting character, wants to talk with him, interview him for a magazine, meets him in a hotel room, finds out that he's a vampire.
And then tries to make him to do tricks to prove it.
Yeah. And ends up actually finishing the interview with him, which is what the entire book is based on, is Louis' stories that he tells during
his life
yes.
of before he was a vampire, how he became a vampire, and what has happened to him since being a vampire.
So it's all sort of told in flashbacks. You see the present day during the interview in this small room with nothing really, just a table and chairs. They're sitting there talking, but then Louis kind of does things like he moves extremely quickly. There's just something about him, very charismatic. The glow of him, I guess, is the best way to describe it.
It's the pale skin glow where you can see just the slight little veins.
It's much more subtle, but you can see that there is most definitely something different about this person than there is about the person interviewing him.
I believe it was during the 80s, 90s back then. Then you flash way back to New Orleans. Cajun times with the voodoo plantations.
Louis at that point is not a vampire.
No, he isn't. He's just a normal person.
He's just a normal dude. He's a plantation owner, wife and kids are gone, and he's like, oh, woe is me. So along comes Lestat and sees Louis wishing for death to take him. Lestat gives him something better and worse.
He gives him a choice, which Lestat never had. That's the big thing about the book. Lestat is a very powerful vampire who has lived many generations and has lost many loves in his life, but sees Louis as a new companion for him, but gives Louis a choice that he didn't have. And the choice is, do you want to actually die?
And Louis chooses to live. Of course, once you're a vampire, you're not really alive anymore. Living forever, not so much. Existing forever, yes.
Yes.
But there's a difference between existing and living.
Because the price of living is blood. There's your price of living.
And death all around you, because when you're immortal, like a vampire, you live for centuries. So as time goes on, you become more lonely, you suffer more and more loss. And then, of course, there's the fact that you have to drink blood in order to survive.
Yes.
Which
is another dilemma in itself for Louis. That's a big dilemma
for Louis. That is a big moral dilemma for Louis, because Louis decides that he can survive on the blood of rats and dogs.
Where Lestat's like, Anytime we gotta find you, Louis, we just have to follow the trails and corpses of rats, because Louis doesn't want to give up his last bit of humanity. Lestat puts him in a very bad situation. Spoiler alert again, where Louis has to make another really bad choice. He goes into the old town in New Orleans where they have been put outside the city because of the disease that was going through at the time. And then Louis has a dilemma because there's this little girl and her name is Claudia.
Yes.
So now is Louis going to lose that last little bit of humanity in himself to save that little girl?
Or is he going to lose that last little bit of humanity and just let her die and turn his back? Because Louis is a very young vampire,
Right.
he doesn't have the strength to actually make her a vampire. He bites her. Lestat is the one
That finishes the job.
Yes.
And he calls him a monster too
Yes.
for doing it.
Claudia becomes a woman trapped in the body of a little girl that never ages.
And gets dressed up like pretty little dolls
Yeah.
all the time. The twisted relationship, because that's all they have is the three of them. And then they all have to coexist, and Claudia is not happy.
Claudia becomes more and more disenchanted with her life. At first it was great, it's fun, but as time goes on, Claudia is less and less satisfied. Claudia wants to be a woman. Claudia is no longer a little girl, even though she's stuck in the body of a little girl. You can see the angst and the resentment.
So the book goes on, and it's Louis' telling of the frustration that you were talking about earlier. Sure, do you want to live that long? Everybody else is going to be gone. Something that happens with the trio.
Claudia tries to kill Lestat.
And that's why they had to leave New Orleans.
They throw Lestat, who they believe is dead because they've cut his throat
And he's
bled
bled
him
out, and he goes old to his old age.
They throw him in the swamp, but he's not dead
No.
because vampires are immortal.
That's right.
So
he feeds
he's
off
feeding off frogs and
crocodiles,
whatever,
and whatever
he can get in the
find.
swamp. Well, they discover a troop of vampires hiding in plain sight as actors in
Playing
France.
vampires.
Yes, playing vampires in their show, but no one realizes that it's not just a show.
Yeah, they think it's just a drama.
They end up joining this
Troop
troop of
of
vampires.
vampires in Paris.
And things just go bad from there. Well, Claudia finds a friend as well,
Well,
and
yes, she
turns
does.
her into a vampire.
And there's already a blood feud against
yeah.
Claudia and Louis for what happened back in New Orleans with Lestat.
And it turns into a really, really big mess, and a lot of vampires are not real happy with them.
And Armando, who is the lead gentleman of this troop of vampires in Paris, a very beautiful, long-haired,
Puss in Boots.
yes, very, very, yes, that's a good one. Very suave, debonair, like Lestat.
Yes.
A very, very old
Yes,
vampire.
very old, very powerful vampire.
And it doesn't matter what he says and what he likes, because of what happened with Lestat in New Orleans, ends up coming down hard.
And Claudia and her friend that she made end up being burned. They start to turn black, and then they just
Their
sort
skin
of
just, and they go to
and
ash.
they disintegrate into
Like
ash
wood,
and
like carbonized wood in a
Exactly.
campfire.
exactly.
And then you touch it.
And it's very sad to watch because the shape of them is still there, but then it just sort of
you touch it and it
you
just
touch it and it just falls
gone.
away. It's sort of an analogy of how fragile human life is as well.
Then Louis gets really mad. And Louis starts taking revenge, and Louis says, that's it, I'm not dealing with any of this anymore, and he goes on his own. Trying to find one vampire out there who has some kind of humanity. And this all evolves in this book as he's talking to the gentleman, doing the interview with the vampire. Louis walks by their old place in New Orleans in modern times, and he senses that something's in there, another vampire. He goes in and he hears the piano playing, and who is it?
It's Lestat.
It's Lestat.
Still alive after all that time. Feeding off animals to survive the same way he berated Louis.
For doing. Now here comes another spoiler alert. In the end of the novel, when they're done doing the interview in that small little room, and he looks at Louis, and he goes, you've seen all these things. That's so amazing. I wish I could have. And Louis grabs right up on him. He goes, you don't know what you want. And scares this guy so bad that he takes off like a bat out of hell, no pun intended, gets in his car, and then starts booking it, putting the tape in and listening back to the interview, and what happens?
Lestat is hiding in the back seat of the car.
And then Lestat bites the gentleman and then says that famous line, which is, I'm going to give you something I didn't get. I'm going to give you a choice. Tell them how the rating system works here.
Well, a good rating is out of 5 black cats.
That's right, and if it's a bad rating, it gets 5 hairballs, or it's out of hairballs anyway.
Yes, it's out of 5
and
hairballs.
5 being the worst.
Now, this book was published in 1976. I probably read it sometime around about 1995. Who Louis was at the beginning when he first became a vampire compared to all of the things that happened to him and who he became at the end. I would give the book 4 black cats.
Oh, yeah, that's not too bad.
I would say 4.
And the thing I like about the book is they took a totally different stance on the vampire.
But since Dracula, some of the newer ones, you're looking at things like 30 Days of Night and John Carpenter's Vampires and From Dusk Till Dawn.
There you go.
But Anne Rice has kept very true to what the original image of the
Gothic,
vampire,
yes.
the Gothic, the original Dracula.
With the cape and the tuxedo and the top
he's the
hat.
very handsome, very suave, very
Blending in.
debonair.
He's a count.
He's the Count.
Yes.
And he doesn't come across as being a monster. He comes across as not necessarily a human side, but he's not a scary, gross, creepy looking.
It's easier to do what you have to do when you blend in with everybody else, because then when you blend in under the radar, you're the last person they're going to suspect.
Exactly.
He's a count. He wouldn't do something like that.
He's Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
He blends in. He's the nice guy next door.
And in this book, they're all dressed up in their little pantaloons and their fancy top hats and their ruffled shirts and their nice little vests. Because back then, it was the high times of aristocracy.
Exactly, and
the powdered wigs.
They did. They blended in.
They blended in. And that's why I give this book 5 black cats.
And I have to give Anne Rice credit. She does a magnificent job of building characters, building settings, building plot.
Let's talk about this. Interview with the Vampire. It was released in 1994. And of course, we talked about Lestat, who on the front cover here is Tom Cruise. And then we talked about Louis, who is
Brad Pitt. Claudia was played by Kirsten Dunst. And Daniel, who conducts the interview, is played by Christian Slater. Armand is played by Antonio Banderas. This was a huge cast.
Monster cast. And it wasn't the only one of the books that were made into a movie. You had something really cool happen about the author with these incredible books.
Yes, I did. I actually had the opportunity to meet Anne Rice at a book signing in Kingston, Ontario.
Oh, shout out to Kingston.
Shout out to Kingston. She was very approachable and down to earth and just a human being.
Which is very cool. This movie is so close to that book, it is spooky.
And the costumes and the settings, it's a very elegant movie. It follows the book exactly. I don't even know how to describe it. The movie just, it shines.
This is a sensory experience. This movie is insane because not too many movies, I've said this before, they don't transfer too well books to movies. Well, this is one that is dead on.
Absolutely. And when they're traveling to Europe and they're on the boat and you're seeing the boat and
Claudia's drawings
and the ocean and just
it's gotta be seen.
Yeah. It really needs to be seen on the big screen.
So now, what would you give the movie?
I would give the movie Interview with the Vampire 5 black cats.
Yeah, I agree.
And now, I normally would not give a movie a higher rating than I would give the book, simply because description generally outshines imagery. You can picture in your head things that can be described in a book that they just can't show on a screen. Not in this case.
No, and I agree. And because the incredible cast that they had,
the movie, standing alone by itself, deserves a 5 black cat rating.
I'm going to give it 4.5 black cats. I still like the book better. If you have not seen this movie, if you have not read that book, and once you get into it, you won't want to put it down. It is such a good book. And there's 2 other ones with the Vampire Chronicles. There's the Vampire Lestat and Queen of the Damned. Let us know what you thought. If you agree with what we've given for the ratings, let us know in the comments section below.
Hi there, and welcome back to the Book Nook.
Start again.
Hi Hi there, welcome back to the Mojo Book Nook. I'm supposed to have a co-host? Oh, really? Oh, okay, sorry, try it again.
Yeah, you gotta freeze.
Yeah. Hi there, and welcome back to the Mojo Book Nook. I'm supposed to have a co-host? Where is he? Okay. No, I moved. Don't count. Okay, one more time.
There's a blooper!
Yep. Please subscribe, share with your friends, like our channel, and hit that little bell notification so every time we have a new video, you'll have a new video.
That's right, make sure you hit that bell. And once again, shout out to Kingston and thank you everybody for coming and joining us today. And thank you as well for coming. And
No, thank you for coming.
Take care everybody and have yourself a smiley happy day. Bye for now.